James, a brief one, and then we'll return to the outrage. Some Oregon outrage. How about that? Hashtag Oregon outrage. We'll put that out twitter.com/media monarchy or at Corbett Report. From naturalnews.com, court forces chemo on 8-year-old Minnesota girl despite family's desire to use alternative medicine, where once it was rare for the courts of law to invade the privacy and purview of parents when it came to raising their children. In today's America, the wall between parental rights and the state's Leviathan is increasingly being dismantled by activists disguised as public servants. And this goes into a sad story in Minnesota. And James, this is one of those stories that I think, I also cover on holyhexes.com when it comes down to, parents who want to, faith heal. And I think sometimes these stories get all kind of lumped together, that basically if you don't want to put your kids through toxic, pharmaceutical industrial complex chemotherapy, even if you're trying to do it the natural way, they can kind of lump it in and go, oh, you're some religious nut, right? You're just trying to pray over them and think everything's gonna be all right, right?
Yeah, well, this goes back to the very fundamental issues of health freedom, which I was looking at over the past several weeks on the Eye Opener report for BoilingFrogsPost.com. The question is, who owns your body and who owns your children? And if the answer is not you, I think you would have to supply a pretty good reason why that's not so. And it's one of those things. Liberty is not always something that everyone's going to agree on. We don't have free speech, the First Amendment, because we want to talk about the weather. It's to talk about controversial things, right? I mean, it's so again, if you don't own your body, then the government can come in and do what they want with it, and same goes with your children.
Well, and then the same goes as we've hit our next story, and this is something that I think we're really gonna kind of take on and become more of a push and take an active move on this. As I hold up my glass of filtered water, however, I haven't had to go out and get an extra fluoride filter because Portland has been one of the last big cities in America to not fluoridate the water. However, I got an email a couple weeks ago from a listener who gave me Dr. Paul Connett's information saying he wants to come out and go big and talk about this. A source from inside the Portland City Hall said, hey, they're about to do a big fluoride push in Portland. And about a week and a half later, here it is on opb.org, that's Oregon Public Broadcasting. Fluoride in Portland water, and I posted along with the headline of the propaganda push begins. A coalition supporting fluoridated drinking water has been working on getting a fluoridation proposal before the Portland City Council. Fluoride proponents say it's a substance that's been shown to reduce tooth decay and improve health. Opponents contend that the benefits are unproven and do not outweigh side effects, and that people should have a choice as to whether to ingest fluoride. Portland is the largest city in the nation not to add fluoride to its water supply. 39 public water systems in the state do fluoride, including Tualatin, Beaverton, and Salem. Residents of Philomath recently voted to bring fluoride back into its taps. And they closed by saying, do you support adding fluoride to municipal drinking water? Why or why not? What are the most important science or policy questions on your mind? And this was the propaganda push on their Think Out Loud segment Tuesday or Wednesday here on OPB. James, ultimately, this is what it's all about. It's about our own personal freedom. If you think fluoride's so good, you go get it. You go do it. If you think the vaccines are great, you go get them. You go do it. Don't force your medicine on me by putting it in the very water that, well, I guess, the other one, if you're going to put a guy in jail for collecting water, I guess maybe the water isn't all of ours, James. But I know you've done a ton of research on this. You've done entire episodes on the fluoride section. So I've already started to put out the call and put out the numbers to City Hall. We're trying to track when they're actually going to put this up because, hey, guess what? I think we've voted it down in Portland 3 times in the past. So that's why they're basically doing an end run in City Hall and are basically going to try and cram it through without letting people say anything. But I think if we show up big time and let them know, then hopefully we're going to be able to fight this off, James.
Well, I'll do what I can from here in Japan to help with that fight, and we should have Dr. Conant on again because he is a great guest on the subject. But all I can say is from my own personal experience, here's my deep confession. I lived in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, most of my life, and they started adding fluoride to the water supply in about 1989, which was when I actually left to go to a different city in that province. But I came back a few years later, and they were fluoridating. And in back 1998, 1999, somewhere around there, they had a plebiscite asking the people, do you want to continue fluoridating? And I was a young, stupid university kid who just didn't care about anything. So I said, well, I don't care. I have filtered water anyway, so what does it matter? So I didn't get involved in that, and I didn't campaign, and I didn't do anything to actually try to get the fluoride removed. And luckily, as people might know, Calgary did remove the fluoride last year, and that was one of the success stories. But I always feel a bit of guilt about the fact that back then, when it came up for a vote, I didn't even bother to vote, let alone to actually do anything about it. So I'm just to anyone out there in Portland or anywhere in one of those places where this is an issue and it's coming up for deciding, if you don't get involved in it, you're going to be kicking yourself for a lot of years to come. So take my advice and get involved in this.
When it comes right down to it, it's an industrial poison byproduct that they go, oh, what are we going to do with all this crap? Oh, let's sell it to people and put it in their water supply and make them think it's good for them. And James, we'll make the obligatory, like you did on the podcast episode. It's about our precious bodily fluids.
Indeed. All right, let's take a short break. We'll be right back to wrap things up after this break. All right, friends, welcome back to Corbett Report Radio on this sweltering hot evening and or morning, depending where you are in the world. But if you're in the northern hemisphere, I hope you're staying cool. And if you're in the southern hemisphere, I envy you. As a Canadian, I much prefer the cool weather to the warm weather. But anyway, James, a couple more stories left. Let's get to it.
Couple more stories. We'll blast through it, and then we've got basically an announcement to make, James. A post from therealfoodchannel.com on the ultimate freedom, and that is food security, and that is, again, going back to making our own food. Meanwhile, we'll see that the big boys will always try and criminalize it because they've got the dough to throw around. But our massive binge and purge is called Nocebos, Mutants, Mess, and More. An interesting one from the New York Times is, again, I explain as I'm kind of going through my own kind of health changes, I find that then I see articles that kind of speak to me and are timely. Beware the nocebo effect. The non-existent side effects of a placebo can be real for a patient who expects to have them. So I'd implore folks to check that out. There's no way I'm going to read through the binge and purge. Again, like all these things, we implore folks to go check it out for themselves. Just some of the high points that I kind of brought out. G20 plans response as food prices climb, as worst drought in more than half a century devastates crops. UN calls on U.S. to halt biofuel production as drought devastates corn crops, as again, the biotech industry has their hand in the destruction that these droughts are causing. Monsanto donates $4.2 million to defeat the upcoming California GMO labeling initiative. I believe that's Prop 37 on the ballot coming up. India cancels Monsanto's GMO cottonseed license. Pfizer pays $60 million for bribing foreign doctors. And maybe this brings it full circle, James, from ClimateDepot.com. They applaud the VP pick, Paul Ryan, and his climate science views and his understanding of the ClimateGate scandal. James, do you know anything about that?
Well, it's not really. It's just another GOP candidate who will go along with the what appeals to the GOP base. So again, it's just left-right politics. So who really cares? And it's not a reason to vote for Ryan or Romney for sure.
Yeah.
Anyway, but at least he's on the right side of one issue.
So, James, this is the sad part of this show, I guess, where I have to say this is probably the last time I can do this with you, James, because I'm about to have a big change in my work schedule. And that's a part of what I'm going to basically make kind of a big announcement on my show live tomorrow morning. Some of the closer folks around me, James, you know what I'm talking about. Brock out there in Australia, he knows what I'm talking about. It's going to be awesome, but it's going to be a huge change and a huge effect on the media monarchy kingdom. ultimately, it's not going away by any stretch. It's going to go through a transition, but I think it's going to be an amazing one, James. So ultimately, we've done 30 episodes of these Food World Order, and I love it, and I love doing it, and I'd hope that at some point we can maybe get back on track and maybe continue these, or even, perhaps do one-off interviews on some of the food issues where maybe we'll kind of focus in on, maybe some of the Portland issues that we've brought up here on all these episodes, James.
Absolutely. Well, you have a standing invitation to be on the show whenever you can, if you ever can, with your new work schedule. And I'm looking forward to that episode and the announcement. And I hope people will tune in because it is a pretty big announcement. So good luck. And thank you so much for all of the work you've done here on Food World Order over the past 30 episodes.
Oh, man. James, it's my pleasure. All the time that you and I have together has been amazing. That's also not to worry, folks. New World Next Week ain't going anywhere. New World Next Week is money.
Absolutely.
We're going to continue that.
We're going to continue that. That is absolutely one of the most important things that I do and you do. So we'll definitely continue that. At any rate, well, let's not make a bromance out of it. I just want to say thank you once again for everything you've done. So good luck on your new work schedule, and we'll talk again in the future, and we'll talk on New World next week.
Yep. Thanks, man.
Take care. Good night, everyone.